Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce a remarkable individual who's making waves in the realm of justice and community advocacy. Please join me in welcoming a candidate with a passion for change and a deep commitment to our community. Originally from the Midwest, but now proudly calling Las Vegas her soul city for nearly a decade.
I'm Rae Canady, and I'm running to be your next Las Vegas Municipal Court judge. Las Vegas is the greatest city in the world, and together we can create the greatest municipal court in the country. I've dedicated my life to helping others because it's not about me, it's about making our community better. Las Vegas Municipal Court can and should reflect our community's values and diversity and provide the solutions you deserve. I am committed to giving you a voice and making sure you have access to true justice. I'm endorsed by Nevada Now, SCIU, Plan Action Nevada, Southern Nevada Central Labor Council, and the Western States Regional Council of Carpenters. They know that better is on the horizon.
This individual brings a wealth of experience and dedication to her candidacy for Las Vegas Municipal Court Judge, Department 5. What truly sets her apart is her groundbreaking candidacy as the only person of color in the race. If elected, she will become Las Vegas Municipal Court's first Black judge, a cultural milestone that adds depth and significance to her campaign. Get ready to delve into her inspiring journey and the transformative change she envisions for our community. Welcome to VegasVibes Junction, Ms. Rae Canady.
Thank you so much. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
The pleasure is mine. Well, I guess I should start off by asking you what inspired you to have a career in law and public service, particularly in your upbringing and your early experiences.
So my parents, I am from an interracial couple. My mom is Caucasian, my dad is African American, and they met and married in the 60s. And in some states at that time, it was illegal for interracial couples to get married. And so one of the things that
in the 1960s?
In the 1960s, it was
wow.
illegal. So the Loving versus Virginia case that was decided by the United States Supreme Court that made it legal didn't come out until the late 60s. And so my parents were of that era of change and of fighting for your rights. And so it was really important for them to instill in me and my sisters a real sense of justice and equity. I joke and I say I understood the difference between equality and equity at a very young age. And my parents kind of explained it just in parenting 4 girls. My mother would say, I don't parent you all the same. That's equality. I parent you each how you need to be parented, and that's equity. And so I understood that from an early age. They made sure that we gave back to the community, that we were grounded in community. And so it's not a coincidence that me and my 3 sisters all went into the helping profession. 3 of us have degrees in social work and 1 has a degree in criminal justice, because that was really the foundation. And so I knew at about the age of 13 that I wanted to be a lawyer. I actually, on my 13th birthday, I wrote a letter to myself that told myself all the things that I was going to do. And I feel very lucky that I was able to accomplish all of those things. So I originally went to college to be a social worker. And I went to graduate school and got my graduate degree in social work. And then I knew I wanted to go to law school, but I didn't want to go right away full time, because I knew then that I would understand social work in theory, but I wouldn't have actually worked in the community. And so I went to law school, but I went part-time. And I worked full-time as a social worker and went to school in the evening and on weekends. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because it gave me a great level of experience in working in the community and working with people who have been underprivileged and disadvantaged. And then I took that with me as I went on to my legal career.
I could tell that your parents did a great job raising
thank you
and your 3 sisters?
3 sisters,
wow.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how they survived a household with 3 teens, but they did.
Well, I'm sure your dad was treated like a king, because
yes. And I thank them for that. Yes,
wonderful.
Absolutely.
Well, okay, as a candidate for Las Vegas Municipal Court Judge, what motivated you to run for this position, and what specific changes do you hope to implement if elected?
So I did not think I ever wanted to be a judge. However, I started working at Las Vegas Municipal Court as an administrator in 2018. And one of the things that an administrator is supposed to do is to set policy for the court. So what are the rules of the court? right? What are the ways in which we're going to handle things? And I quickly learned that the judges at Las Vegas Municipal Court want to be very heavily involved in making those decisions. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem came when I tried to advocate for policies that I thought would really help our community, and most of them were shot down. I got a no for most of them.
Give an example.
Sure. So one of the examples is I wanted to be able to remind people about their court appearance. It's the same concept as why your doctor reminds you about your doctor's appointment, right? They understand that your appointment is important and your health is important to you, but life happens. And so sometimes when we make the appointment, we forget to put it in our calendar, or something else comes up and we forget. And so they just send a little reminder so that you say, okay, I won't forget. It's the same thing that I wanted to do to remind people about their court appearance. The truth is that a lot of people have other larger issues going on in their life, and appearing in court kind of takes a back seat sometimes. And so I presented that. It was a program that would have been no cost to the court. I was able to get assistance from Stanford Law School's Legal Design Lab. What they wanted to do was to study, because we have decades of research that tells us that if you call someone or you send them a letter or postcard to remind them about their court appearance, it dramatically reduces them missing court. What Stanford wanted to do was to study whether text messaging would be just as effective. Because even though text has been around for a long time, we don't have any research that tells us whether that's just as effective. And so they were willing to give us the software, they were willing to integrate that software into our case management system. They just wanted the raw data so they could look and see if it was effective. And the judges said no. And when I pushed back a little bit and said, but why? I'm confused, because this is going to be free for us and it will really help folks make sure that they come to court. When they miss court, there's a warrant that's put out for their arrest. When they get arrested, that costs the taxpayers money to put them in jail. If they go to jail, they may lose their job, their housing, their children. It's a win-win for us. And what I was told was, hey, we're not here to hold people's hands. And I was so disappointed by that response that I decided to run. And so I made that decision 3 years ago. I had to pass the Nevada bar exam here because even though I had been barred for almost 20 years, Nevada said, we don't recognize any other license, you have to take it here. So I was able to finally pass that, and I decided to run.
I'm so glad you made that decision.
Thank you.
We need more people who are assertive and who really cares about the community.
Thank you.
Being the only candidate of color in your race, how do you perceive the significance of potentially becoming Las Vegas Municipal Court's first Black judge? And how do you plan to leverage this representation for positive change?
So I think it's tremendously significant. On the one hand, it's somewhat sad that we still have firsts in 2024, not just for African Americans, but for all of our communities of color. But on the other hand, I'm extremely excited. I am okay with taking on the burden of being the first, and I hope that I will represent our communities well, because I think it's not just for the African American or Black community, it's for every community of color. Representation and diversity is really important. I often find myself being the only person in the room who has a perspective of our communities of color that no one else has. And when you're making decisions about people's individual lives or you're making policy decisions, you should really have an understanding about how each community works. And so I think it's important that when people come into court and they see someone who looks like them or who is reflective of and understanding of their culture, it's extremely important. When I was a criminal defense attorney, and folks would walk into my office, people of color would sort of take a sigh of relief. Because for them, they felt like, okay, we're already on some common ground. I'm gonna be able to share my experience with you, and you're gonna be able to relate to that and empathize with that, because we have some shared lived experiences. And when you can do that, that cuts away a great barrier for people who might be hesitant to share their story, to really tell you what's going on in their lives. And so when we can dispense of that, I can more quickly get to the root of why are they here in court? How did we get to this place? And what do we need to do in terms of support and resources so that you can leave here being a much more productive community member?
Yes, I think that's very important, that when you know the person you're talking to can relate to your experience and empathize with you.
Exactly.
100%.
Exactly.
It makes a world of difference.
Absolutely.
Can you share some insights into the challenges faced by marginalized communities within the judicial system, and what steps do you propose to address these disparities?
So I will say this, even in 2024, as I go around campaigning and meeting with different organizations, I still get asked certain questions that sort of make you feel disappointed. For example, someone asked me, how was I going to be able to make sure that I was culturally competent to work with communities of color? And I explained that I had 6 different certifications in diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and justice, and they were offended that I used the term anti-racism. Another group that I spoke with told me that they hoped I didn't play the race card. And so we still have these conversations where I think that representation and diversity is important. So I think it's important to share with the community what distinguishes me from my other candidates. But then some people look at that as saying that we really shouldn't be discussing race at all, that those differences don't matter. But I think they do matter because, as I mentioned, I think it really helps with your level of understanding and empathy about what's going on with someone. And I think also in terms of the struggles that people of color face, right? People of color are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system for a variety of reasons. But what I think the court can do is, number one, give them a level of understanding and empathy that they may not get in other courts or anywhere else. And then the issue of language is really important. And so I understand that there are certain legal terms that we have to use in the courtroom, but for the most part, we don't set people up for success by giving them forms that are in their native language or forms where we break it down. We don't have to use so many legal terms. Or if we have to use a legal term, we can say after that, what that means is, right? Because it's very difficult to understand these concepts. And so when somebody comes in and they want to speak in their native tongue, or they want to speak in a way that makes it seem much more comfortable for them to relate their story, I'm okay with them doing that because I've been in those communities and I understand what they're saying to me. So I think it is really, really important that someone who is from a community of color understands those issues. The last thing that I think is important is in terms of finding resources, right? Since I'm familiar with communities of color, I have a ton of connections with community resources that work with people of color. And so as I am getting to know this individual who's coming before me and figuring out what their needs are, I can plug them into resources in the community that I don't think some other judges have taken the time to really explore.
Wow. Your campaign emphasizes creating a community-centered court system. Could you elaborate on what this entails and how it differs from traditional approaches to justice?
Thank you. That is an excellent question. So, municipal court is the court closest to the community. It's the reason why I want to run for this court. I'm eligible to run for other courts, but this is the only court that I chose to run in because I want to return municipal court to the community. And so when I say it should be community-centered, what I mean is that I want the community to have a say in how that court is run. And there's 2 main ways I want to do that. The first is by encouraging people to give us feedback about how we're doing. When I was an administrator, I wanted to create a survey for folks who came through our system to figure out what we're doing well and what we could improve upon. And the response was, they're just going to complain. And I said all feedback is good feedback because even through a complaint, it gives us an idea of what we could work on. So I will make sure that we have folks who have the ability to give us their feedback, their honest feedback, so that we can continue to make improvements. And the second way is by creating a community advisory council. So there are some court systems that have what might be referred to as criminal justice councils, but they're really sort of higher level. They're sort of talking about larger systemic issues. I want to create a community advisory council that I meet with on a quarterly basis to give them data specifically from my court because I want them to tell me how I can do better and how we can improve the outcomes for the folks who come through our system. So I really want to hear from the community. What are we doing well and what can we do better? And that's extremely different from the way that court systems are run now. In a large sense, they feel like we know what we're doing, we know best, and we really don't need to hear from the community. And I think it's the exact opposite.
I believe that's the true essence of public service.
Absolutely, I agree.
And I commend you for that.
Thank you.
How do you envision fostering greater trust and transparency between the judiciary and the community it serves, particularly in light of recent events that have shaken public confidence in the legal system?
That's another great question. One of my goals is to restore trust and confidence in our system. And I know that's a tall order for one judge, but I intend to do that in a couple of ways. The first is, like I mentioned, by truly soliciting feedback from the community. The second way is by making sure that my courtroom is always open and welcome to people. If you go down to any courtroom on any given weekday, most likely the courtroom door is locked. And we started that during COVID to try and control the flow of traffic, but COVID is over and the courtroom doors are still locked. And that gives the community the idea that they're not welcome.
Yeah,
and
you should have an open door policy.
That's right. And the truth is, you have a constitutional right to go into any courtroom and observe the proceedings. And one of the things that's important about transparency is being open. When people feel like decisions are being made behind locked doors, they become even more suspicious of that system. So my courtroom doors will always be unlocked. When people walk in, we're not going to assume you're there because you have a case. We're going to assume you're there because we're welcoming you, and you can be there for any reason you need. And I think the third way is in making sure that I share the data from the court. If you try to find out recidivism rates for courts right now, or how many cases have come through, it's very difficult. And I think that's intentional. I intend to be very transparent with my data, because if I'm not doing well, I want people to know it, because I don't deserve to be reelected.
Absolutely right. But you will be reelected.
I sure hope so.
Of your heart to serve.
Thank you so much.
Your background includes experience as a social worker, child advocate, and trial attorney. How do these diverse roles inform your perspective on justice and advocacy, and how will they influence your approach as a judge? So
for me, as I mentioned, I think before we started taping, was when I got done with graduate school in social work, I went on to law school, but I went part-time because I really wanted to work as a social worker in the community. I knew that if I went straight to law school full-time, I might understand social work theories, but I wouldn't have actually put them into practice and worked in our community. And so I made sure that I worked full-time. I went to school part-time in the evenings and on weekends. So I was a non-traditional student. It took me 5 years to get my degree. But I'm so thankful, because I think that experience of learning social work concepts and then actually putting them into good use in the community helps me understand, when people come before me, what their issues are. I think being an advocate, child advocate, is really important, because in some ways we joke often and say that adults are just big kids, right? In many ways that's true, because what they are coming to us with are the traumas of childhood. I mean, that's just the truth. And so understanding child development and having advocated for children, I'm able to kind of look into that person and look at the little Esmeralda and say, what does little Esmeralda need in order for adult Esmeralda to be productive? Because we have a ton of folks who come in with trauma-related experiences, and that's what's holding them back. That is what is dictating the poor decisions that they're making, or their substance abuse, or whatever it is that has led them to be there. So I think that's really, really important. I also think it's important having court administration experience, because I've practiced in front of the bench as an advocate, and I have practiced behind the bench, understanding how the court system works and creating policy. And that's really what judges do. When you talk with the community about what's the number one thing you want to judge, quality in a judge, they'll say experience. But they don't realize that that experience is multifaceted. It needs to include policy development experience and also management experience, because the judge manages their courtroom and all of the staff in it. And when they're not good managers, the courtroom can't run efficiently. So all of the experiences that I've had over the past 25, 26 years, I think, put me in the best position to really run a court that is efficient and effective.
You're going to be a great judge and a leader. What strategies do you propose for ensuring equal access to justice for all individuals, regardless of their socioeconomic status, race, or background?
That's another great question. So one of the things that I advocated for at municipal court was for us to determine ahead of time, right? I didn't want to clog the court system up when the judges were actually on the bench, but let's determine ahead of time what their ability to pay is, which means, let's say you get pulled over and you're speeding, and you get a ticket and you have to go to court. Right now, whether you make $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year, your fine is the exact same. Obviously, that's going to more disproportionately affect the person making $20,000 a year when your fine is $500, $600, $700. And so I said we really should figure out what people's incomes are so that we can tailor the fine to make sure that it's not disproportionately affecting the folks who are in lower socioeconomic status. And they said no. And they said, well, people will just lie. They will give us false information so that we can't actually determine what their income is. And I said, well, we have ways around that. We can ask for their tax, their last year's tax return. Or we can just start simple with people who are receiving public assistance benefits. We know that they've already qualified because they fall below a certain income. We could do that. And again, the answer was no. So one of the things that's very important to me, and in fact it's a constitutional right, is to make individual decisions about people's fines. Because somebody who is rich shouldn't be paying the same amount as somebody who is poor. It just shouldn't happen. It needs to be enough of a fine that it deters their behavior, but not so much that we are costing our community resources. I don't want anybody to have to choose between paying rent and paying a speeding ticket.
How do you plan to address systematic issues such as overrepresentation of certain demographics in the criminal justice system and disparities in sentencing?
So I will answer that by telling you in the audience that there are some people who are running who don't believe that there are disparities in our system. There are disparities in our system. And I know that some people may not want to hear that or may not believe that, but it's true because we have the data that supports that. One of the things that I think is really important is to implement research-based decisions and best practices into the court system. We have decades of research, like for example, we know what's effective at making sure people show up for court. We have tons of other research that tells us what are the effective ways to prevent crime and the ways to effectively work with folks when they come into the system. And yet, we have so many judges who think that they can use their gut to make a decision, or they can size someone up correctly. When we do that, our biases come into play. And I think we can remove that as much as possible by letting the data lead us, and then we follow with compassion. So for example, one of the projects that we had at Municipal Court was creating a research-based tool to determine who should be released from jail when they're arrested and who may need to stay in custody, okay? It takes out the biases, right? We're not making that decision based on race, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, culture, gender, any of that. We're looking at what the research tells us helps us determine who's a good risk or a bad risk. Those are the kinds of decisions that we should implement at every level in our court system, and I'm committed to doing that.
Wonderful. Finally, what message do you have for the residents of Las Vegas as they consider their choice for municipal court judge, and how do you hope to inspire and engage them in the electoral process?
Well, I joke around and say I wish I could bottle up a little bit of that hope that like Obama had in 2008 and sprinkle it across the city. Since I don't have that ability, I just want to share with folks a couple of things. The first message is to research the candidates. It is really hard to do that with judicial candidates, I know, but I want people to make informed decisions. And part of this campaign for me is to help people understand what municipal court judges do, to help hold them accountable, and to make your voting decisions based on who you think is going to be the best candidate. So if you have no other resource, Google it. And if not a whole lot comes up on a candidate, that's not a good thing. That means they really haven't been out in the community and they really haven't stood for a whole lot of things. The second thing I'll say is that I love the city of Las Vegas. I call it my soul city, as you mentioned in your opening. I have the Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign tattooed on my back.
Oh, wow.
Because I love this city so much. And so, like I said, I really hadn't planned on ever running for judge, but working for the city and seeing what I saw, I was so offended for our community. I felt as though the city that I love was being tricked. There was an affront to our city. And so I decided to run because I truly care about everyone in our community and I want everyone to prosper. And I guess the third thing I would say is, unlike my opponents, I don't come from wealth. I don't come from legacy. I'm running a small grassroots campaign, trying my hardest to make positive changes for our community, and I hope that our community sees that and comes out to vote in June.
Yes. Kindly tell us a bit about your sign here.
Sure.
Winter is on the horizon. Rae Canady for Las Vegas Municipal Court Judge, Department 5. I love that your slogan. And now, caring, committed, and competent.
Yeah, so one of the things is navy blue is my favorite color. And blue and yellow are the colors of the University of Michigan. Go blue, that's my alma mater. I say better, so when I introduce myself to people and I say my name is Rae, they'll say, oh, like a ray of sunshine. And so I thought I would play on that a little bit with the sun and the rays. And I say better is on the horizon because I do think that I'm the better candidate. I do think that if voters choose me, it will be a vote for change, a vote for improvement. I say I'm caring, committed, and competent. Caring because, as I mentioned, I absolutely love this city and the people in it. I'm committed because I have a 25+ year career in the helping profession. I've always been a public servant. I've never worked in the private sector. Nothing wrong with that, but my heart has always been in helping people. And I think it's really important that folks understand the variety of experiences that I've had. And then I say competent because of the variety, right? Having experience in front of the bench, behind the bench. I've done criminal and civil work. I'm the only candidate with as much jury trial experience as I have. And it wasn't until a few years ago that you could get a jury trial in municipal court, but now that you can, it's important that a judge understands how jury trials work. And so that sort of sums up. I had tons of people have lots of other suggestions for colors and logos, but for me, this feels authentic and it's true to, I think, who I am.
You know, I really admire people who uses their accolades, whatever they have, their degree for a good cause,
Thank you.
To serve people, to enrich other people's lives.
Yes, thank you.
And I really see
appreciate
that in you and your sincerity.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. I appreciate that so much.
I wish you all the best. Miss Canady, if you had one superpower, what would it be and why?
If I had one superpower, so my superpower would be to stop time. That would be my superpower. And I think it's because I feel like I never have enough time in the day. But also, I lost a really good friend of mine 4 years ago. And in my brain, I think if I could have stopped time, maybe I could have just a little bit more with her. Unfortunately, she passed away very young. She had a heart attack, and it devastated me.
Broke your heart.
It broke my heart. She was a lawyer also, and she was just 1 year out of having passed her bar exam. And so I like to think that she is with me on this journey and gives me strength, and I miss her tremendously. And so that would be my superpower.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rae Canady, and I wish you the best of luck this
Thank you
coming
so
election.
much. It's been my honor and pleasure to be on your show. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You take care and God bless.
Thank you so much.
As we conclude our conversation with Ms. Rae Canady, let's take a moment to reflect on the powerful vision she has shared with us today in her pursuit of justice, equality, and community empowerment. Ms. Rae embodies the spirit of positive change and resilience. As she continues her journey towards becoming Las Vegas Municipal Court's first Black judge, let's all be inspired by her unwavering commitment to making a difference and her dedication to creating a more inclusive and equitable society for all. Remember, the power to effect change lies within each of us, and together we can build a brighter future for our community. Thank you again, Ms. Rae Canady, for inspiring us all to dream big and strive for a better tomorrow. Until next time, take care and God bless.